Hey guys, welcome back to Action on Gamers. Today we're gonna talk about a really sweet series, and a series that's really close to my heart, by the way. It's Dragon Quest. And oh, finally we get to talk about Dragon Quest. It's funny I say finally because Dragon Quest is essentially a game you should talk about in the beginning if you're gonna make a show like this, where we talk a lot about JRPGs, because in its core, Dragon Quest is the essential JRPG. It has founded all the rules, it has created all the groundwork for every single JRPG that is to come and has come. Now, what can I tell you about Dragon Quest? I really want to make this personal because I want to tell you guys my story about Dragon Quest. But just to get it out of the way, Dragon Quest was released way back in the 80s, the late 80s actually, and it was met with tremendous praise and a huge fan following in Japan. Designs are made by Akira Toriyama, the creator of Dragon Quest, which attributed to the fame in Japan, of course. And it was one of the first JRPGs on the consoles, if not the first actually. And with that out of the way, I want to tell you guys that I was really late to the party with Dragon Quest. It's a shame to admit, but I was. I played Dragon Quest 20 years after its release in Japan. I played it just about 2009-ish. My first Dragon Quest game was Dragon Quest 3. Dragon Quest 3 is really renowned for its party-based system where you create your own party members and basically you have a bunch of different classes you can choose between, and it set the groundwork for even that kind of thing, at least for consoles. And I must tell you guys, at first I didn't really understand why I loved the game so much. Just from the moment I booted it up, I felt a sense of wonder and somehow familiarity. I felt nostalgic, and I couldn't really grasp it in the beginning because why would I feel nostalgic about a game that I had never played before? And so, just a few hours in, it hit me so hard with a bat. This game reintroduced me to a lot of elements that I had previously seen in games like A Link to the Past and Pokemon. Games that I had played in my past. And, you know, those games introduced me to those concepts, you know, in actuality. But now that I played Dragon Quest, I felt like it was doing it all over again. It was telling me all these things again, but it wasn't irritating. It just felt like I was feeling all these sensations once more, like I was being told all these new things again. And it was so much fun just looking at all these graphics, listening to all this great music. So nostalgic, so great. And now that it actually is a nostalgic memory to me, it's even more so because of all this. So, how could you top that? How could I ever top Dragon Quest 3? Well, I was looking around for another Dragon Quest game. In Europe, we never really got too many Dragon Quest games, as far as I knew back then. We only got a bunch of Game Boy games, and those were ports of the older games as well. And that for me wasn't really interesting. I really wanted to get into like a new Dragon Quest game. So I was browsing around, I was checking out Dragon Quest 8 and Dragon Quest 5. And I was so stoked to just pick up one of them. And I decided to go with 5 because it was really close to Dragon Quest 3 in terms of graphics and everything. And I felt like that would be the perfect thing to branch off to. So I played number 5, and oh boy did I not regret playing that game. Dragon Quest V is such an amazing ride. It's such a unique way of telling a story and creating a game. It's hard for me to put into words, but I'll try to tell you. And let me give you an example of what happens early on in the story, which just defined the game for me in the early parts. You play as the kid of a hero. And that's a very common thing, like you start off the game as a kid, right? But this game takes you throughout childhood into adulthood. From being a child to getting a family, that concept alone is really cool. How you see your character progress and grow. But really what really set things off for me was that early in the game you start off walking around with your dad. You're part of your dad's party out of all things. So you don't really have direct control in the overworld map, for example. Your dad controls everything. And then when your dad tells you strictly not to go outside your town to play, because there's monsters outside, it's dangerous, and you do it anyway, you get into a random encounter with a slime. And being a gamer, a veteran JRPG gamer, as I was at the time, I figured, there's no problem with this. I'll just beat the slime and get it over with. I've beaten a countless amount of slimes in the past. But for some reason, the game made it really hard for you to beat that specific slime. And so what the game did was that it had your dad swoop in and save the day in the last second. Like, the moment you were about to die, your dad just jumps in with a strong spell and just casts it on the enemy. And that moment for me was such an epic moment. The feeling you get from getting saved by your dad, you don't really get that in any other game. And that just defined the game for me right there. And it just went upwards from there. It was just an amazing ride throughout. Then from there on, I decided to check out Dragon Quest VIII. And Dragon Quest VIII is such an amazing game, because it does something that a lot of games from that generation were so afraid to do, and just did it. I'm gonna tell you one thing straight about Dragon Quest, and that is that it's not afraid to stick with its tradition. It sticks with its tradition so hard, actually, that it's on the border of being Recap City. And, just rehashing everything it does all the time. I feel like, unlike games like, I'm sorry to say, Pokemon, which I feel is very, it very much does the same things for each entry, Dragon Quest actually tries to spice things up by adding all these small fragmented pieces that actually does the difference. Dragon Quest VIII sticks to the traditions just as well as any other Dragon Quest game. How that helps this title in specific is that it's not gonna cut out on any content when it comes to the world map. So you have a sprawling, huge world map, fully in 3D. It's amazing. It's so lively, and it's just grand to see a map like this in a 3D game. Even Ni no Kuni, which was made by the same developers, Level 5, didn't do that, and that came out on the generation after. It doesn't skip out on any content. It has all the greatness that makes Dragon Quest perfect, and that, coupled with the fact that it doesn't cut out on any content, unlike most JRPGs at the time, just makes it an astounding game, a really amazing title. We have all these things that made Dragon Quest great in it. It has a great battle system, and of course it tweaks the battle system, which is very rare for the Dragon Quest titles. We didn't really see a proper evolution of the battle system until the third title, and after that we got some kind of monster raising, monster capturing elements to it, but really never really got a full-on expansion of the battle system. I think Dragon Quest VIII does a very good thing where it gives you a lot of freedom on how to customize your stats, which in turn will give you a lot of great opportunities to get attacks, specific attacks for specific classes, and so on and so forth. And the presentation is just mind-blowing. Seeing this Dragon Quest world in full 3D finally, after coming from Dragon Quest 3 and 5, and then jumping into 3D with Dragon Quest VIII, was just amazing. Really what I mean with how good it is that Dragon Quest keeps its tradition, because it doesn't cut away on all this great content. It still keeps everything the same, so when it goes from this 2D conceptual art into 2D, it looks like it should, but then also when it goes from 2D to 3D, it looks just the same. And it's something to be said about Dragon Quest. Really, you can't really do this with many series. Then you also look at, for example, a funny thing about this is town designs and also NPC designs are very similar from game to game. So you'll actually encounter probably the same NPC in different titles. And that's insane if you think about it. But it works in Dragon Quest for some reason. I have no clue why. In any other practical situation, if somebody came up to you and said, hey, let's use this NPC design from the first game all the way up until the 10th. Would you actually go through with it? Well, you know, most people would not. But Dragon Quest does what it does, and it does it fantastically. And of course from there on out I just started playing all these other Dragon Quest games, which was a great treat in its own right. I love Dragon Quest IV for its chapter-based way of telling a story with all these great characters, even throwing in shop management and what have you. And I loved Dragon Quest 1, even though it's super short. It's just about 2 hours when I played it on the Game Boy port. Just 2 hours of great fun. It felt like a little mini side quest in a bigger game, which is hilarious, but it was really fun to play. Something about Dragon Quest now is just stuck in my mind, and every time I play a Dragon Quest game, I can't help but feeling wondrous and nostalgic. So let me share a golden memory with you guys, specifically about Dragon Quest VIII. This was way before I started playing Dragon Quest III, and it was at the advent of my JRPG fanatic craze. And back then I just wanted to get a really cool game for my PS2. So I was checking out the internet, and I found out about Dragon Quest VIII, or Journey of the Cursed King, which it was called in Europe. I remember distinctly looking at the character designs. I was really familiar with Chrono Trigger back then, and I don't really know what was wrong with me, because I kept making these weird associations where I sort of coupled the universes of Dragon Ball and games like Chrono Trigger. And now that I saw Dragon Quest, it was even more confusing for me, because it had the name Dragon in its name. And to make matters worse, in Dragon Quest VIII you have a feature called Psych Up, where you basically use a turn to power up, and this counts up in percentage, and when you reach 100%, you actually reach a form of Super Saiyan state where your characters glow purple and they have spiky hair, and it totally looks like something from Dragon Ball. And so my small mind just blew up. It was so fun though. The very same feature is actually in Dragon Quest IX, so that's pretty cool. If you love games for the smaller things especially, Dragon Quest is totally worth a shot, and I think all of you JRPGs enthusiasts owe it to yourselves to play it. Me, for example, I love the fact that all of the different regions of the game in the world map have different accents basically, and it's such a charming small detail that just makes this game so much grander in the end. Some fans like it, some don't, but I personally love it. But I digress. I can't really say what drove me to play Dragon Quest in the first place. Maybe it was some kind of weird obligation. I really don't know, but I feel like everybody should owe themselves to play Dragon Quest. It made me realize that a lot of the simpler JRPGs out there are actually a lot of fun. Coming from the most simple JRPG you can find and playing anything else afterwards is always refreshing. And sharing this game with Senkai, Dragon Quest V, is one of my greatest gaming accomplishments, between the two of us at least. And you know, this is what it's all about in the end, sharing the love for series or just games you love. So you guys, until next time, I hope you guys get gaming, especially if it's Dragon Quest.